So today's video is going to be vastly different, and it's going to be talking about some of the more niche teams that I like to play, specifically including Sethos. Now, if you haven't watched much of my content or you're new, I like to run niche teams, right? My best team and my most used is going to be a Nilou Bountiful Core team, and that's kind of standard. However, I have Coco and Yao Yao built full EM. Yes, it is my Demon Yao Yao, so like I do run kind of that niche-ness. I run a Chiori Alhaitham Kuki Shinobu Farina team, which is a really weird quick bloom team that's really niche. I've been running Emily, Dia, Milane, Shilonen. I am a partial Dia main, so like this kind of makes sense. However, this is like a burning vape team that works really, really well. I do run the Chevy overloaded variant of the Raiden Hypercarry team, so like that's not the standard team. This is the team that I was talking about in the last video with C6 Candace, with Layla, Arlecchino, Candace, Shilonen. And then this team is Sethos, Kirara, Shilonen, and Farina. So I like running niche teams. I don't necessarily say that everybody should run it, but I like playing the game this way. And in this video, I wanted to talk about one of these niche teams, including what I would consider a very niche character being Sethos. Sethos has not gotten a lot of attention, but I really like him. I think that he's one of, if not my favorite male characters in this game. I really like his kit. I like how it works. I like how there's a balance between using his skill or burst. You kind of either play him skill damage or burst damage, but you can choose which one you want to do. So it's a very interesting character that plays in a more unique play style, and I really like that fits well into my wheelhouse. Also, I'm not going to be up on the green screen, so I have the Fox PNG today. It would be way too complicated to do that for this. Now, one of the pivotal characters in this team is going to be C6 Kirara, well, let alone C5 Kirara. And the reason why that matters so much is because one of her constellations makes her really, really good in this team. I do have her as a full shield build. However, she is running Deep Woods. For later on, we're going to be adding in Hyper Blooms. Her C4, not C5. After the character shielded by her deals normal charge or plunging damage, Kiara will do a coordinated instance of damage that's going to be Dendro damage, so reapplying the aggravate, spread, quicken aura. But this is considered burst damage, and because it is considered burst damage, it will activate Deep Woods effect, making the enemy weaker to Dendro, so that way the Hyper Blooms can deal more damage. So this is again a very kind of niche build in this instance, to allow Sethos to cause quicken and aggravate, as well as trigger hyper blooms coming from Farina. So this will be a quick bloom team. Shilonen is in there to heal, giving fanfare stacks to Farina, as well as making the enemy weaker to the elements because of how Shilonen's, I think I've said her name like 3 different ways, Shilonen's kit works. So again, this is just a very, very niche team. However, I love it. And I wanted to talk about a couple different variations of this team, starting with Sethos, Kirara, Shilonen, and Farina. Also, at the end of the video, I will have my Sethos's build on screen. It's not something that I've worked on. I just kind of had these artifacts and weapons lying around. So I threw it on him, loved his playstyle, and now I want to invest much heavier into it. Now we are doing a domain that is not going to increase the damage from like Farina's burst if we did that domain in Fontaine. It is going to, however, it will be giving EM to our characters, but Sethos can make use of that on both teams, so it's not going to make a huge difference. Now, when I said that this was going to be vastly different than all my other videos, I meant it. And what I mean by that is that I'm going to be scrolling around on the time on the screen showing the damage that is being done. So we are of course going to apply Electro there. We are then going to go into Shilonen, and we are going to proc her artifact set, Cinder City, and we're going to go ahead and make the enemies weaker to all of our elements, being Electro, Hydro, and Geo, because it doesn't work with Dendro. Shilonen is also only level 70, and she doesn't have her signature yet. Then we're going to go into Farina, and we're going to start the activation of adding the inconsistent or slow Hydro in there to create some blooms, but not a ton of blooms, right? Kirara is going to come on the field, and she is going to make these blooms. Sethos is then going to use his charge shots, his shadow piercing shots, to do damage. Now that was 36k, 36.778k. That was actually not an aggravate. We haven't even gotten into the aggravate reactions yet. They are, however, triggering the hyper blooms as well because of how Sethos works. If he does a shadow piercing shot, it will shoot through enemies, hitting multiple enemies, multiple things, including the blooms, causing hyper bloom. So whenever he also uses a skill, like right there, he's going to hyper bloom those, and they are going to do 15,891, so not like terrible hyper bloom damage. If we bring Furina back on, activating her minions, using her burst, going to Shilonen, using her burst to start getting the fanfare points, going back to Kirara. Now, we should be getting into the quicken as well as the hyper blooms. So those are doing 15 damage, 15,000 damage. This shot is going to do 52,876 on the aggravate. So that's really, really good for doing that damage to multiple enemies, hitting through multiple enemies. That is going to be getting the fanfare points. That is going to be getting the decrease in resistance from Shilonen and aggravate. And then, of course, we still got 15,891. Shilonen does not increase the damage of the hyper blooms. 53,419 on the aggravate. The only thing, that was another 26,000. The only thing that I noticed from this particular team, in the original Sethos team that I was using Fischl, and Fischl was giving Sethos energy to use his shadow piercing shots more often, right? Because that's how his entire kit works. Is you have to have energy for your burst. Whenever you use this charge attack, it's going to decrease the amount of energy that you have remaining to then fire off a shadow piercing shot. And without other characters, without another battery in here, it's much more difficult for him to constantly be able to use it. Yes, his normal charge shots can trigger the hyper blooms and cause aggravate reactions, and you'll kind of get to see that. Where it's only going to be doing like 16,000 instead of near 60,000. But you can still use it to also trigger the hyper blooms. You can do that to where you're still causing damage. There was a 32,000 right there. Another 32,000 right there as well. But you still have a ton of damage coming from Furina's minions. You have the fanfare points. You have the fanfare points coming from how they work with Shilonen making the enemy weaker. You have a lot of things kind of going on. And of course, this was not the original team that was running with Sethos. That's actually going to be later in the video. Another thing that I did notice though, is that it is harder in this team to make sure that Sethos is getting the benefits from Shilonen's artifact set being Cinder City, because of Furina's inconsistent, slow Hydra application. If you don't time it right, it is much harder to guarantee that Sethos is the one getting the Cinder City buff. Also, because typically you use Furina's burst and then you go into Shilonen and use her burst, that's causing the elemental reaction. So then Furina's mainly getting the use out of Shilonen, not as much Sethos. It's a little bit harder to kind of guarantee it goes to Sethos. So let me know what you think about this team. I did really enjoy this team. Like I said, they were hitting well above 50k, I think into the 55k. So it was not a bad team, but we're gonna swap it up now. And this time we're going to take out Furina and we're going to add in Fischl. Fischl is going to help battery Sethos a little bit, so that way he can get more of the damage. It's going to take away the quick bloom, is going to go straight into an aggravate team. Now Fischl should be able to help make up the difference in overall damage coming from Furina's minions. And she'll also be able to cause aggravate reactions herself. So we should have a fair good amount of difference. Now, that was a 45k. Hang on, let me actually go back on that. That was a 45k from Sethos. Yeah, 45k right there on the aggregate, 45,800. So we lost about 10,000 damage on Sethos. However, we do have Fischl doing it, doing the damage more, and Shilonen is not going to accidentally give the buff to Furina because Furina's not here. It's always going to go to Electro because Geo and Dendro can't react. So it's always going to go to Geo. So it's more consistent, in my opinion, on the who's going to be getting the buff and who's going to be able to do your damage. but it's that was a 24,000. Let's see here. There was a 30,000, 23,000. We're still being able to hit multiple enemies. 40,000, 23,000, almost 24,000. You're also going to notice that Sethos might be able to get more shots off because we have Fischl giving energy over to Sethos, and we have like Shinnolin also. What was that? That was another 45,000. 13,000 on the skill use, 45, 865. Okay, so still pretty consistent as to how much damage is being done. It does give a little bit of a more wasted time when he can't use his shadow piercing shots, because we can't just do normal attacks or normal charge at fully charged, not fully charged shadow piercing shots, but fully charged charge shots to activate or to proc hyper blooms, right? Because we're not causing hyper blooms, there is a little bit more of a downtime in damage. But overall, the times at the bottom, I think it added on just a few seconds. It wasn't something like, you know, we went from running this in 50 seconds to a minute 30. It was like from like 50 to 55, 48 to 55 seconds, which in the Abyss can matter, but something like when testing here, it is just like a little bit more of a slight damage difference. Is that 45,000? Yeah, 800. Yeah, 45,865. So it's very, very consistent with everything that we were seeing before. It is a little bit. We do have to kind of make sure that we put Oz in a good spot where he's going to be able to feed energy over to Sethos. Where if the enemies are moving, we kind of need to like reposition him a little bit. But all in all, still not bad. Very consistently hitting that 45,800. And now we're going to swap up the team again. So this is the original Sethos Aggravate team that I ran, and that was Sethos, Kirara, Kazuha, and Fischl.